Hey, what's up, guys? No, what's on my nose? Is that acne? Oh, I think that's like, oh, it's like lotion. I think. Um, I want to make a video on intuition and fear, or like soul and ego. So, a lot of people probably don't know the difference between soul and ego. What's what, like thoughts or whatever that you're processing. Which one's which? Um, Usually the way how I differentiate from them is they both can be consistent, but usually anything that's ego based is usually inconsistent, and it usually triggers up from either your environment or from the people around you or from things you've been exposed to. And usually it can be things that are really irrational, things you may not really believe in. It may not be consistent. Now, it can be consistent where you're thinking about it a lot at a certain period, but once you get over those feelings or whatever, you just completely forget about it. Where intuition is far more consistent. Also, before we go into that, ego is more like erratic. It's more so panicky. It's more so afraid. It's more so like it's more of a violent feeling that you feel. Like the thoughts or whatever may be more violent or more chaotic or urgent. Where e I'm gonna I really hope that recorded. I don't know if that recorded because it just like my AirPods just glitched out. But I'll just say that again just in case. So ego and fear. Ego pretty much is the thoughts that you get that are erratic. They're they can be confusing. They can be really demanding. They could be anxious. They could be fearful. Anything like that, and it usually stems up from things you've been exposed to, whether if it's programming, people around you, or if it is your environment or whatever. But they're usually things that are inconsistent, and it's usually things that are irrational. Um, and intuition, your soul, is usually more on the calm side. It's usually really consistent. Even years later, you may still have the same ideals or downloads or whatever you feel years later. With your ego, it's not going to remember that shit unless you're constantly thinking about it over and over and over again. You're constantly feeding that to yourself. But with your intuition, it's things that are really consistent. It's soothing. It can actually be really. It depends. It can be really unconventional in a sense where it can embrace you to do things or believe in things that are not um practical in terms of like normalcy, like normalcy, whatever the fuck, how you want to say that, like society shit, whatever. Or it may be suggesting things that you don't see or you haven't really been exposed to, but um these are things that can be possible though. But it's practical, and it's really soothing. um it takes mastery to understand which is which. A good way to strengthen your intuition is to learn to be in environments that are calming, right? Being in environments that don't stress you out, and just being to yourself and emptying your mind. Because once you empty your mind, you can understand, your intuition. You can actually hear it, and you can differentiate between what's your intuition and what's your mind, right? Um, and once you learn to do that, life becomes way easier, and you start to realize what to believe and what not to believe. Um, it's really important to kind of master your intuition at some point, because your intuition is the thing that really um guides you and really protects you, and your ego doesn't really know anything. Your ego is just like really irrational and fearful, and it just goes off of it's they're both pretty much like the same thing, to be completely honest, but like the mind is far more outdated and primitive than the and irrational than the ego. Like the ego and the mind can do the same things, all senses, everything like that. It all does the same thing, except for the ego is far more, I meant the soul is far more advanced. And for me, I like to just more so focus on my soul rather than my mind. um your soul, your mind can both warn you on things, but your soul focuses more on what's actually real, and it can see things ahead of time, and it can just really just put everything together, piece everything together, where your mind is just focused on right now, like what's happening right now. When your soul thinks about what, like, it sees the bigger picture, what you're heading into, everything like that, how things can affect you, all these different things. It sees the big picture of your life. It sees the future of your life. It sees the past of your life. Where your ego only thinks about how things can affect you now or whatever. And it's really like it's really delusional based, rather than your soul. Your soul isn't really delusional based. It can seem delusional based because of how like fantasy it is, but it really isn't. But yeah, it's a skill to learn these things, but it's ideal to learn them eventually. To learn the difference between your soul. Owie, my hand still hurts. And your ego. So yeah, I'm not really an egotistical person. Sometimes like I notice like I really ignore my ego. Sometimes I'll be in situations and I'll feel it. Like I'll feel anxious, or I'll feel like insecure a little bit, or like envious a little bit, or some of these feelings just a little bit, because I still have these senses, but they're usually really low, and I usually just make sense out of it and everything like that, or I just ignore it. If I just know, just like, yeah, it's really hard to describe it, but it really is a skill that you just have to learn throughout time and just master, and I think it's a really important skill to master. Sorry, I'm not really like a teacher or anything like that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it for a little bit. Yeah, ego and soul. Wish you the best with that, you guys. Yeah, you got it. I believe in you. I believe in you.